You have the damn nobles out there, they are poisoning our water and turning our granary gay. No, I needed to do that with a French accent, but I just can't. I can't assimilate an Alex Jones. I'm not that angry. Anyways, let's keep going. What is up, people? Jack here with another video. So I'm back checking out some more history videos recommended by you guys, and this one is by a channel called Oversimplified. I think that I may have come across these, or I may be confusing them with the ones that have like the balls representing the different countries. Yeah, I think that's the one. But nevertheless, this is going to be fun because the first one that I'm stumbling on here is the French Revolution. One event that has affected quite a bit of Europe, but also, well, the rest of the world, as it was inspired by the Americas at the end of the day. But, well, the whole tumultuous events that brought up the French Revolution was quite something. And it's one of the few moments where I am very thankful that pop culture and video games are a thing, because what I mostly remember from it stemmed from me playing Assassin's Creed Unity. Yes, a video game. That's why they are super important, parents. Get your kids to play some, you know, good ones. And then there are a bunch of gamers coming to me and going like, what? AC Unity? Yes, that was actually a very, very well accurate game, representing a bunch of the things going on in the French Revolution. Allons enfants de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé.
I beg your pardon?
Yes, there exists a gospel version of the French. Well, it's half done by a French comedian. We never got to see the full thing, but yeah, it sounds pretty dope. But without further ado, guys, let's check out the French Revolution by Oversimplified.
This video was made possible by NordVPN. Get protected by clicking the link below and get an amazing 75% off. New French Revolution merch available now in the store, including King Louis and Marie Antoinette character pins, complete with detachable heads, just like the real thing.
Robespierre style.
So I said to the Marquis de la Fufayette, "What do you think I am? Some dirty peasant? I've never worked a day in my life." Wow,
the
that
nobility.
Marie Antoinette sure is pretty. Sure is. Wouldn't want to be Prince Louis though. That's
Why
going
is
to be
he
a lot of responsibility when he becomes king.
like an
especially
emo
since
king?
France is in financial ruin. Quite. Thank you one and all for attending the royal marriage of my grandson, the future King of France, to the Archduchess of Austria. Now for the very awkward yet historically accurate part of the ceremony, where we all watch them get into bed together.
Yeah, it's true.
All right, now that's out of the way, let's leave the royal couple to it. You better give us an heir, you fat, ill-bred boy. Nighty-night.
Interesting thing here. Beddings were a thing. Yes, as he mentioned, they are realistic, and it really did happen. Mostly around Europe is what most of them have been recorded, but you also see cases like that in like Asia and also Africa. In pop culture, you may have come across many of them in the likes of shows like Game of Thrones. Vikings, I think, also has that, in the way that the people had to assimilate like Christian culture, which is not truly a thing within Christian culture, not even back then, so I don't know where that stems from. But there was, the whole process at least was that due to the royals, in this case, having to confirm the weddings, had to see the couple consume the marriage. And that was done through them doing the act. But before so, a priest will come and bless the bed, because, I don't know, some wild stuff had happened the day before and they needed to clean the bed or something. But nevertheless, it was an actual thing. Now the people, just as you saw here, would never truly go to watching the deeds. Always, it would happen. Most of the time not. When it comes to Asia, for example, you will have cases where women that were married and had a bunch of children would be the ones well, setting up the bed for the newlyweds, because it was a sign of blessing, because then they would bear many heirs and many children. Well, yeah, it was a very, very weird custom, and good lord, it's been done with.
That's going to be a lot of responsibility. France is in financial ruin. You fat, ill-bred boy.
Boy.
That's going to be a lot of responsibility.
Poor guy.
France is in financial ruin.
Oh, I haven't seen this face in a while.
Oh, great. He's a freaking weirdo.
Wow, when is this video? It's
France, the most prosperous, cultured,
good old
and
memes.
beautiful nation in the world, as it had been for centuries. An exquisite social culture, with the king of the upper classes throwing crazy parties every night, enjoying high living and fine dining. Who cares that they were only able to do so off the backs of the hard-working, starving poor? What are they gonna do? Revolt? They're only 80% of the population. No.
It's insane.
Life in France is great. What's that, France? You want to go to war with Britain and increase your power? Go for it, little buddy. You do you. And you lost.
You know what's crazy? As somebody living here in Denmark, due to the Napoleonic Wars especially, this is not the subject here, but the alliance, Napoleon ended up having one of the biggest armies out there, if not the biggest. And Britain having the biggest fleet were kind of knocking at the door of countries such as Denmark at many occasions and like wanting to make a deal. Like, do you want to join our navy? We know that you two have quite the naval fleet, so let's join forces. But Denmark was like, nah, Napoleon is cool. Let's side with him. Well, this very loss here resulted in many of the territories that Denmark owned to be lost. And, well, whoever sides with anybody who tries to invade Russia on a cold winter day, well, good luck.
Now you're in severe financial debt. We have no money. What do? Should we stop partying? Heck no. Party harder. That's okay. The peasantry will pick up the slack. They were created by God to do all the work, and you were created to reap all the benefits and party hard. That's just how society works, and we've all just accepted it for centuries. Why? Why what? Why do the nobility get to be all rich and stuff? Just because they were born into it? And the rest of us schmucks just have to accept that? Hell, why do we even need a king? Who decided that? It all just seems very unfair and unequal, and I, for one, am starting to question.
Buddy!
Wow, that's very enlightened of you.
Oh,
and so began the Age of Enlightenment.
Age of Enlightenment.
Great philosophical thinkers across France and beyond began to question whether this beautiful nation was really all that beautiful after all. Hey, Prince Louis, bad news. Your grandpop died of smallpox this morning, which means, good news, you're now the king. So just to sum up, France is in severe financial debt, and the angry populace are beginning to question how necessary you are. But hey, I believe in you, champ. You got this. Maybe. Oh no! Prince Louis Capet became King Louis XVI in May 1774. He was a notoriously weak man, and he knew it. He barely had the wisdom to rule a nation, never mind one in crisis, and he was easily manipulated by those around him.
Party time! Well, still party time. We have no money. Party to forget. Heads are gonna roll. Lol, JK. Just keep partying. Yes, it was bad. It was really bad. Especially due to what he mentions here, how easily manipulated he was.
One of his first acts was to try to get revenge on the British by financing their American colonies. Hey, we're an independent nation.
Georgie!
That was real swell of you, Louis. Couldn't have done it without you. Glad I could help. So hey, about all that money we lent you, when can we get that back? Yep, you're a great guy. I'll never forget what you've done for us. Real glad I could help.
Never got paid.
About that money. Gotta go now, chum. Best of luck to you. And now France was in even more debt. France's poor, suffering under the strain of economic ruin, watched as the nobility continued to live as though nothing was wrong. In particular, they grew increasingly disdainful of the Queen, Marie Antoinette, as she continued to spend all of France's money on her own luxurious lifestyle and fashion. While the peasants were breaking their backs in the fields, she was walking around like, hey, my hair is a boat. I'm not making that up. Her hair really was a boat.
What? I knew that some of our kings did some extravagant things, but this is far... Look, I've come across the whole quote of give them cake. Yeah, because of the whole corn issue that they had. That led up to quite a bit of the demonstrations on the streets of Paris. especially, but towards the entirety of France. Some bad years of starvation where, of course, the nobles just had everything that they needed, right? Where the peasantry just had to starve. And then you have somebody like this walking around being like, hey, just let them eat cake if they can't eat bread. Like, I don't know why she will have a British accent. I am very terrible at doing a simulate of a French accent. Parce que je parle déjà français, donc c'est vraiment difficile pour moi. But yeah, Marie Antoinette was quite a troublesome individual.
And her lavish spending earned her the nickname Madame Deficit. And speaking of the Queen, there was also a long-standing scandal around the fact that the king took a very long time to boink her, and the working class of Paris began ridiculing the royal couple with lewd pamphlets depicting the Queen as a court thought, and the king as a wuss, unable to fulfill his marital duty. Respect for the monarchy was at an all-time low, as France's finances were spiraling out of control, and the king and his aides really only had one solution to the crisis. Tax the poor. Tax the poor. We could do a sexy calendar shoot.
Tax the poor?
Tax the poor. And so it was. The poor, who were already struggling to make ends meet, found themselves being taxed from every direction. Hey, I'm the royal tax collector. Looks like you've yet to pay your income tax, head tax. By the way, how many windows you got in that house of yours? 3? Oof, yep, there's gonna be a tax for that.
Whoa. Okay, a bit of interjection here. The thing with the windows might actually be realistic. Now, it's not necessarily a tax, but given the fact that I used to study building and engineering before I changed to physics, when constructing a house here in Denmark, according to our building, what's it called? What would be the translation for that? Building regulations. According to that, 11% of the floor area of your house is supposed to be the window area. The reason for that is that we want to have like natural ventilation, because the air exchange within the house needs to happen like 1.5 times per hour. So unless you cover that in your window area at least 11%,
do you want to tax that ass?
Hey, your local priest here. Have you paid your church tithe yet? Well, at least this one is going to the good work of God.
1/10.
Sure.
Sure.
God.
It's the Catholic Church.
Wants me to buy a new swimming pool. Hey, private tax collector here. Oh, and I brought some goons with me. Just a few quick questions. How much salt did you buy this year? About 7 kilos, I think? Yep. Okay, there's gonna be a tax for that. Oh, what's that over there? And that's extra salt I held over from last year, so I wouldn't have to buy as much this year.
I know they will use that to conserve
there's
food,
a tax
but...
for that. And what are you doing with all of this salt? Well, obviously cooking. On the table. Yep. And preserving fish and meat. Oh.
Yes.
Oh no. Yep. And there's a tax for that. Hey, how old is he? He's 9.
Oh no,
so
not little Jean-Paul.
Of salt for this year, right? What? No, he's 9. Uh-oh. Sorry, little Timmy. Looks like I'm gonna have to tax you for that.
Are you serious?
Salty. There's gonna be a tax for that. And that's not all.
Can you imagine that for a moment? Just somebody coming towards you, like the tax collector. So, excuse me, I need to check the salinity of your son's tears. Too much. It's too high. Too much of a concentration there. And also the pH. What is your kid eating today? He's not eating anything. Oh, that explains it. We need to tax that ass. That would be so terrible. My gosh. Actually, I need to look this up. French Revolution salt tax. Okay, we have something here called the gabelle. Oh, let me move my face here for a moment. Okay, so it says here, it is from a tax of France before the Revolution of 1789. In particular, from the 15th century onward, the tax on salt. That's a 15th century thing. The nobility, clergy, and certain other privileged persons were exempted. Obviously they were. The high tax rate and unequal distribution of the gabelle provoked widespread contraband dealing with salt by smugglers.
Pas mal, non? C'est français.
What? The gabelle's unpopularity was forcefully expressed in the list of grievances drawn up for the Estates General of 1789. On the eve of the Revolution, the gabelle was abolished in March 1790. Good lord! The French were insane.
huge portion of the peasants' harvest had to be given up, and there was also the labor tax, where peasants were required to work a certain number of days for their local lord without pay. Obviously, people weren't too happy with these taxation policies, and the aggressive nature of these private tax farmers sometimes even escalated to violence. In particular, though, the people really hated how inconsistent the taxation rules were across the nation, and also the fact that the first two estates often had to pay very little, if any, tax at all. And so, the anger continued to grow. France had a population that was just about ready to explode. What could push them over the edge? How about a touch
like
of
30
natural
million
disaster? A series of harsh summers and winters left the peasants' harvests in ruin, meaning they had no food or money, and the cost of bread skyrocketed. Of course, the upper classes had massive stocks of grain and wheat, so they were virtually untouched by this new crisis.
Drowning in
but
baguettes.
the poor really were starving, and they began to riot. Women took to the streets. Bakeries were raided, and bakers suspected of keeping bread for themselves were sometimes even hanged.
Oh.
Wow, this is really getting out of control. Your Majesty, we need some decisive action. You need to step up and lead us. What will you do?
Fat,
Okay,
ill-bred
I've got
boy.
this. I know. I'll summon the Estates General, and they'll decide what to do. You really are a fat, ill-bred boy. The Estates General was the closest thing France had to a government, apart from the king.
This is so beautiful. During a mission in Assassin's Creed Unity, yes, I'm making a video game reference here because it's actually good. It's pretty good. But during one of said missions, you are actually taken to the very event of the king summoning the three estates to come and have talks. Now, within there, you have the likes of, for example, the guy who, in the Bill Wurst video, could have made a religion out of decapitating people.
Maximilien Robespierre. No guest.
Maximilien Robespierre, who was part of the Third Estate. The reason for that is that he too was one of the very, let's say, a purveyor of human rights. Yes, it's kind of ironic with how everything turned out. But at the time, since the clergy and the nobles there had absolute disregard of the lower class, something needed to be done. Also, the Third Estate at the time was actually not really comprised of the meanings of the populace, right? It was mostly about like those slightly higher in the hierarchy of the middle class. So we're talking about lawyers, politicians, anybody who had a bit more of influence were the ones who were involved. So during said gathering here, you actually have like a kind of accurate conversation of both people mocking the king, talking about how long is he going to talk. You have the very scenery itself of the king just constantly doing some verbal gymnastic, trying to explain his way out of how it is that the state has fallen to constant depravity and debt, and nobody's really listening to him. But, well, at the end of the day, it just ends up pissing people off more because, well, the nobles and the clergy were the ones who came out of that victorious, out of that talk. Yeah, very bad.
It was a purely advisory body and was rarely summoned. In fact, it hadn't been summoned for 175 years prior to this. But with France in a severe crisis, the king felt the time was right to call on the government to help. The Estates General was made up of representatives from the three estates, that is, the clergy, the nobility, and everybody else. Okay, thanks for coming, everyone. The first order of business is regarding the clergy and nobility. You all get brand new Porsches. You get a Porsche, and you get a Porsche, and you get a Porsche. Everybody gets a Porsche.
That's good.
And now into the second order of business. France is completely out of money. Like, it's never been this bad before. Anyone got any ideas? How about we all get Lamborghinis next time?
Hey!
The king decided that in order to make a decision, they had to come up with a voting system. Okay, the clergy. You have a population of 130,000, so you'll get 1 vote. The nobility. You have a population of 350,000, so you'll also get 1 vote. And the third estate. You have a population of 27 million people and make up 98% of the population. Very impressive. You'll get 1 vote.
2% of the population ended up dominating everything. If this is not the birth of elitism, then I don't know what is. This whole concept of, as I've mentioned in the beginning of the video there, that just the peasantry were just born to be servants, right? That the nobles and clergy were there assigned by either God or it was their birthright. This is so ridiculous. And think of the fact that such things led up to us having a better notion of democracy. That's why it's so highly important that when we see these types of events, the type of abuse of power is constantly monitored, right? We have something here that we call the trifecta. We're talking about the legislatures, the executive, and the jurisdictional, right? Actually, come to think of it, that is a thing for most democratic countries, isn't it? But you actually have a fourth entity that is, well, journalists, right? The news. You know, the ones who are supposed to give you non-partisan, information. Unfortunately, it's not always the case, and that's why the whole thing of misinformation is such a big problem nowadays. Back then you had L'Ami du Peuple, which was like an inflammatory, I'll almost call it a magazine, but yeah, like a journal that people will read and it would incite more anger in them. Ended up being the thing that sparked out the whole off with their heads kind of mentality that they had during the French Revolution.
The Third Estate were obviously pretty unhappy with this system because they kept on finding that this would happen. We propose to raise taxes on the Third Estate. All in favor? All opposed? 2-1. Taxes will be raised on the Third Estate. We propose a motion that says the first two estates are a bunch of poo-poo heads. All in favor? All opposed? 2-1. It's official. We are not poo-poo heads. The Third Estate realized that any attempt at reform would be outvoted by the two upper estates, and they thought that was kind of lame. So they decided that since they were 98% of the population, they could go off to form their own government, make their own laws, and take over the running of the country. And so, the National Assembly was born. The Third Estate was now in control, and there was nothing the king could do to stop. Ha! I've locked you all out of your building. What are you gonna do about it? We'll probably go find a different building that isn't locked.
Yeah.
Ow, no! The National Assembly did find another unlocked building, just down the road, an indoor tennis court. Where on the 20th of June 1789, they all took the tennis court oath, pledging to continue meeting until the king finally gave in to their demands for more equality and economic reform. This new National Assembly included many of the most educated members of the Third Estate, including two young lawyers by the names of Maximilien Robespierre and Georges Danton. Some members of the first two estates even joined their cause. Some of these men formed a radical new political party called the Jacobin Club and quickly became leading figures. While many members of the Third Estate simply wanted more equality, a growing number in this Jacobin faction would begin calling for something even crazier, the removal of the king entirely. And this is where fear began to take hold. With such a volatile situation developing, everyone was afraid of something. The king feared his position was under threat, and he called in the military to take position around Paris. The Third Estate heard rumor of the gathering military force, and they feared the king was planning to round them up and arrest them. Maybe he'd even execute them. It also didn't help that the king had just dismissed France's popular finance minister, who had been trying to make reforms himself. It seemed the king was done negotiating. Fear, left unchecked, often boils over into anger, and anger detonates with violence. The angry people of Paris, after centuries of cruel inequality, harsh oppression, even starvation, fearful of having their new movement for reform demolished so soon, decided that it was now or never to take action. Screw reform. They decided they'd do one better. How about revolution? The people of Paris, believing the French military was preparing to attack, decided they should arm themselves. The National Assembly announced the creation of a bourgeois militia, the National Guard, and immediately many troops from the French military defected over to the revolutionary side. In the early hours of July 14th, 1789, a large crowd stormed and raided the Hôtel des Invalides, a military hospital where they were able to secure a large number of rifles. The bad news was they weren't able to find any gunpowder for their new weapons. The good news was they knew exactly where to get some. A prison fortress and a symbol of royal tyranny towering over Paris, the Bastille. Mid-morning, the crowd gathered around the Bastille and demanded that the man in charge, Governor Delaunay, surrender the prison and hand over the gunpowder. Obviously, Governor Delaunay was like, no way. So he stalled for time by inviting a few members of the crowd in for negotiations. The crowd, still waiting outside, quickly became impatient, and before long, they stormed the fortress, taking on the French troops inside. Your Majesty, we've received word that the people have surrounded the Bastille. Governor Delaunay will hold them off. No need to worry. Actually, Your Majesty, It appears the crowd is now headed away from the Bastille. You see? What did I tell you? Clearly Governor Delaunay has defeated them and has them on the run. No need to worry.
Idiot.
Your Majesty, isn't that Governor Delaunay's head on a pike? Well, clearly Governor Delaunay has taken on the form of a bodiless pikehead deity, and the people are so enamored with him, they're parading him around the city. No need to worry at all. When the National Assembly heard about the violence that had taken place, they had two options. Either one, they denounce it and try to carry on the revolution using peaceful means, or two, they say, damn, you stuck his head on a pike? That's pretty hardcore.
Awesome.
And we love it. Incidentally, they went with option number 2. Some historians believe this reaction paved the way for the utter violence and bloodshed that would become the legacy of the French Revolution. This widespread acceptance of violence during the Revolution is also largely credited to the writings of a certain Jean-Paul Marat, a man of science with a horrible skin condition that kept him confined to a bathtub.
He's the one who wrote the L'Ami du Peuple.
He began writing a radical newspaper he affectionately named The Friend of the People.
Friend of the People.
Citizens of France, be very afraid. Given the chance, the king and the nobility won't hesitate to massacre us all. The solution is simple. Execute them. Kill every last one of them. Cut off 1,000 heads. And if that's not enough, cut off 1,000 more. Oh, hey, Mr. Squeaky. What are you doing down there? You're so cute. Aw, I love you too, Mr. Squeaky. Mwah. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah. Kill them all. It became one of the most popular publications in Paris during the Revolution and succeeded in spreading ever-increasing fear and anger.
InfoWars of the time.
In August, leaders of the National Assembly, with help from a certain Thomas Jefferson...
Now I'm thinking of him as Alex Jones. You have the damn nobles out there. They are poisoning our water and turning our granary gay. No, I needed to do that with a French accent, but I just can't. I can't assimilate an Alex Jones. I'm not that angry. Anyways, let's keep going.
Adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, an incredible document that guaranteed liberty and equal rights to all men. And when I say men, I mean men. Despite its glaring shortcomings in gender equality, the massively influential declaration would go on to inspire the struggle for liberty and equality across the planet for centuries. However, back in France, the vast majority of the people weren't really so concerned with enlightened ideas of equality as much as they were concerned with the fact that they were still starving. Bread was still expensive as hell and hard to come by. The people felt that one reason nothing had been done yet about the crisis was because the king simply couldn't see the problem. He lived in Versailles, a full 20 kilometers southwest of Paris, and as a result, lived in comfort, separated from his dirty, stinking subjects. On October 5th, a crowd of women, 7,000 strong, decided they'd do something unprecedented. They decided they'd remove that separation and confront the king directly. The women marched all the way to the king's palace in Versailles. Along the way, the crowd continued to grow into the tens of thousands, and when they arrived, they demanded an audience with the king. What are those things outside the palace? They're poor people, Your Majesty. Kings. That's poor people? They say they're hungry. Hungry? Then let them eat cake. Wow. See, this is the exact BS that led to this whole mess in the first place. You're so out of touch. They're writhing around in the filth, breaking their back to barely scrape by, and they come to you demanding just the basic ability to feed themselves, and you think a slice of cake will sort them out? Well, then let them eat Taco Bell Crunchwrap Supreme. Wow. They're not that desperate. Members of the crowd actually managed to break into the palace with the intention of killing the queen, who narrowly escaped through a secret passage in her bedroom. The enraged mob killed several members of the royal guard and raised their heads on pikes, which, if you haven't noticed yet, is something they were quite fond of doing.
Yeah,
the king had no choice but to come out and talk to the crowd. He agreed to accept his new position, sharing power with the revolutionary government, and to return to Paris with the crowd, removing the separation between king and subject. King Louis had a problem with people constantly raiding his palace, but one thing he didn't have a problem with was people raiding his computer, because he used NordVPN.
That is smooth.
Like me, you don't like hackers stealing your data,
Internet historian style,
bank deets, and girlfriend, then you need to check out NordVPN. With over 5,000 servers in 60 countries, it allows you to surf the net anonymously and safely with no personal data logging. It's super easy to use. You can take a trip to a server in Japan with vpn.com/oversimplified.
And next part we get to see a relatively, average-sized man, Napoleon Bonaparte. This is good. Yes, the French Revolution, quite something that ended up inspiring quite a bit of the good around the world, but also a lot of the bad. I think with Napoleon it affected a bit of the school system, because he did establish some new things. I think high schools stem from him, lycée, as we like to call it, as we call it in France. But guys, thanks a lot for checking this video. I know that it may have been a bit longer than the actual thing, but yeah, wanted to pass a bit of knowledge here and learn some new stuff. Thanks a lot for checking this reaction out of the absurdity of the French Revolution, and come back to part 2 and we can check out how the whole thing culminated. There doesn't seem to be a part 3, so that's what I'm going to assume here. But guys, thanks a lot for this, and you know what to do. Hit that like button if you liked the video, and subscribe if you want to see more. With that said though, I wish you all a wonderful evening, and see you guys next time. Bye.